Hey photographers, welcome to the Bokeh Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz, and I'm here to help you build a sustainable photography business. That means improving your photo skills, building on your business knowledge, and honing your marketing abilities. But it also means helping you work more efficiently so you don't get burnt out in the long run. We do try to bring the show to you commercial free, so make sure to check out our sponsors, photographersedit.com and Miilu, Miilu.com. Photographer's Edit is custom photo editing for the professional photographer, and Miilu is the simplest way to create and manage timelines and shot lists for the events you're photographing. Again, photographersedit.com and Miilu.com. All right, let's get into today's episode. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Bokeh Podcast. We're here with a brand new episode, brand new series, actually. Or I say brand new series. We've been doing a few of them this year, 2020, on brand position. And we're doing these brand position consultations, if you will. And really, this is just a conversation that I'm having with a few photographers about the development of their brand position. I am joined by the wonderful Tosha. Thank you so much, Tosha Gains, for hanging out with me today. This is the second episode you've done with the Bokeh Podcast.
I know. Weird, isn't it?
Oh, you're a celebrity. I mean, so everybody that hasn't heard your episode yet, if you go back to episode number 300, actually, we talked about the therapeutic photo sessions that you do, which is a really cool concept. And, so much of what brand position about is distinction, right? Setting yourself apart. You do something in those therapeutic photo sessions that definitely set you apart. So for anybody listening in, if you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to Tosha's episode. We'll link to that in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. But today we're specifically talking about brand position development for Tosha's business. And Tosha, you and I, just to kind of break the fourth wall, we've been going back and forth chatting about this a little bit on Facebook Messenger, right?
Right, we have.
Well, and I want to give just a little bit of context to what it means, what the idea of brand position even means for those of you listening in. And then we'll kind of dig into some of the conversation that Tosha and I have been having behind the scenes. And ultimately, this is meant to be a conversation. As I said, the goal is to ultimately land on a clear and distinct brand position for Tosha's company, for her business. And whether we actually land on the very specific brand position she runs with today, or this becomes a conversation that kind of takes Tosha in the right direction, either way, it'll be of value not only to Tosha, hopefully, but also to everybody listening in to better understand the significance of the brand position in the process of marketing your business. And Tosha, I'm going to give a little bit of context to our listeners too. The benefits of a brand position for them specifically. Number one, potential clients immediately will know your unique value proposition. So if they come to your website, or maybe, old school, they get a business card or flyer, something to that effect, but they see something about your business, you're able to immediately communicate the unique value proposition, how you or any other business adds value to their life. And that is the end goal here. How do we add value to their life and do so uniquely or distinctly from another business? Number two, it filters irrelevant potential clients. So if they see or hear about your UVP and it doesn't match what they're looking for, they're like, oh, I'm going to go find a different photographer. And that's okay, because we want clients that match our brand. The third benefit is that it simplifies and focuses our marketing efforts. That means that we don't have to juggle multiple marketing messages in the effort to try to bring on new clients. If we have a very clear and distinct brand position, all of our marketing efforts center around that. And then the fourth benefit, again, for everybody listening in and for Tosha as well, it encourages better time management. So the goal here, and of course, much of what we talk about in the podcast is about time management, working efficiently. If we know what our business is trying to accomplish, what we're trying to accomplish with our business, I should say, then that will drive literally everything that we do in our business day to day. It's really fascinating, actually. It filters out anything that's irrelevant, enables us to focus on that which is most relevant to our business goals. So those are the benefits of a brand position. And to be clear, it's not an end-all, be-all. It's not, all pieces of the puzzle. It is a piece of the puzzle in our effort at marketing our business, but it plays an important role. It's not talked about enough in the industry, and so we're doing that here on these episodes. All right, so enough of me rambling. That's a little bit of context to the conversation, but I want to just get right into it and give our listeners some context, Tosha, and help me understand a little bit better. So just to give context as far as your market is concerned, right now you are based where? And I think actually two different markets, right?
Yeah, I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, and Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, so and two pretty significant markets, a little ways apart. What is that, 2-3 hours apart?
2 hours, without me getting caught by the Calls 145.
Fair. Well, we don't want you to do that. But that's two pretty distinct markets. Now, have you ever thought about narrowing it down to one of those two markets?
I have thought about that, but I still have my love for my home city, which is Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay.
So I built a lot of community here. I moved to Atlanta just because I started an occupational therapy business and a nonprofit there. So I started spreading my wings there because I'm there mostly now and only here in Birmingham on weekends.
Gotcha. So you kind of have to be in both places anyway. So why not market to both, right? The only caveat to that, and part of the reason that I ask, is when I was looking at each of those markets. For example, I just did a quick search, and we'll get into this in more detail in just a bit. But when I did a search on portrait photography in Georgia, because actually when you go to your Instagram account right now, the position statement that you have or the reference that you have to a location is Alabama and Georgia. Those are pretty big markets. If we get more specific to Atlanta and Birmingham, that at least narrows it some. But when I search, I pulled this up. It's kind of interesting. When I pulled up portrait photographer or portrait photography in Atlanta, Georgia, I got, 579 million results.
Yeah. I should break it down. I thought about breaking it down just because I live in Smyrna, Georgia, which is like 15 minutes outside of Atlanta.
Right.
Well, and I'm out, I guess, in metro Atlanta. I thought about just going straight to Smyrna and just targeting the Smyrna, Midtown, and Marietta area.
Which is smart. And again, we'll get into this in a bit more detail in just a few minutes. But narrowing, when you establish a brand position, one of the ways that you can create distinction is by calling out a specific segment of the market. Now, that could be a particular type of person or segment of people. That can also be a particular location. And so that, if you say, hey, I am if I'm a Chattanooga wedding photographer for skateboarders, for example, and this is an example I keep using over and over again, but skateboarders are a particular segment of the market. That's a particular group of people. And of course, I'm calling out a location, Chattanooga, and then wedding photography is the genre. So I'm getting specific in three different ways right there. That immediately is going to help narrow search results. It'll also help narrow my marketing efforts. So that's just it's something to think about, is to get a little bit more specific in that regard. But what type of photography do you currently tell your potential clients that you specialize in, if you do at all?
Right now, I'm learning what I don't like to do. Totally found out the hard way.
Sure.
But I do like doing lifestyle, and lifestyle does involve portraits and family sessions. I still get people asking me that. But I've been moving more to branding. I know that's like the most popular thing right now, but I still do that just because I'm detail oriented. What I do for branding, I do a little bit more questionnaires. I get to know the patient. Not patient. I get to know my client. I'm sorry, the OT thing kicks in sometimes.
Yeah.
And I've really become personal with it because I need to know who you are before I shoot you, because if I'm shooting your brand, I can't shoot something I don't know about. So also I still do events. I get called a lot for events, so mostly corporate and commercial events as well.
Okay. And then you also, something you haven't mentioned that you talked to me a bit about was the special needs photography as well, right?
Right. I am actually going into that now. I've been doing a lot of research lately because I noticed that's something that's not publicized for people with special needs, individuals general. And when I went, and then I narrowed down my searches, like, is any other therapist, like occupational therapist or physical therapist, is specializing in special needs? And then I don't see that. I mean, I know one in particular, but she does it as a project, but not offering that services to that person. I'm sitting here like, well, maybe if they can get somebody who understands sensory motor behavior, show how to do it in natural environment. Because I know a lot of portrait photographers say, oh yeah, I shoot special needs. I'm like, okay, you shoot them, but do you understand them totally? And they don't. They just know I can shoot a picture when they're in the moment, but not understand totally what they're going through.
Yeah, and I'm gonna break the fourth wall again here, and not to spoiler alert a little bit, but you and I talked about this, and I'm such a huge fan of the idea for multiple reasons, and I'll go ahead and say this too. I don't know if I even mentioned this to you, Tosha, but my former partner was working for the local. It's an Orange Grove Center is the name of the establishment here in the Chattanooga area, but they are dedicated to working with the special needs community here in Chattanooga, and so at one point I actually lived in a group home. We live with three guys. And so I'm very closely associated with that world, and have such a heart for that community as well. So I'm a little bit biased, I will say. But on an objective level, and looking at it from the standpoint of an entrepreneur and a business owner, the best thing to do when you're trying to create and establish a brand, particularly a clear and distinct brand position, but ultimately a business, is to go where there isn't a lot of busyness, right? So, for example, if I want to be a photographer, and I'm like, I want to be a wedding photographer, it would be a little bit, I mean, there's opportunity still there, but I'd be jumping into a really busy market. But if I say I want to be a special needs photography, if you just do a quick Google search, anybody listening in, you're going to find that there's really not, there really aren't that many photographers that are dedicated to that particular need. And so by doing that, Tosha, you'd automatically be going into a segment of the market that is not, I mean, it's highly underserved, which means that there's more opportunity for you. So we'll get into that more in just a little bit, but lifestyle, branding, events, special needs photography. I know that you talked about branding and asking questions. Is that not something that a lot of branding photographers do? Do they tend to just kind of jump in and photograph?
Well, my background is occupational therapy with an art history major. With me, I look into colorology. I look at your personality. I do a personality test to ensure that you and me are even compatible. Because I know that I'm like really out there sometimes with my personality, and I know some people can't handle that. But I feel like knowing the person's personality and their brand, where they're trying to display themselves, is a big thing. So that's one thing that I like to distinct myself with other people. It's like, hey, I actually go into details, delve in, find out what things you want to do. I make my own mood boards, and then I let their clients make the mood boards too. So we try to put both our mood boards together to see can we curate them together. I have a lot of back end things I do before I start shooting.
Wow. Okay, so you create a really distinct experience in that regard. So, and I know that you were kind of torn as we were talking prior to today's interview that, you know, about whether or not you go one direction or the other, or just have two different brands, and whether or not you have two different websites that support those two brands. There's a lot of questions here, and I know it's really hard to narrow down, especially when, in some ways, you may still be wanting to generate just as much revenue as possible, utilizing the strengths that you have. It can be a little disconcerting to say, okay, I'm going to set these aside and focus on one thing.
Right.
But there is such a really interesting opportunity to focus on something that not a lot of photographers are focusing on. Again, I'm a bit biased in this case on multiple levels, but we'll talk more about that opportunity in a second. What type of, or what percentage, I guess, of the services that you're offering right now are represented by lifestyle, branding, events, special needs? Like, how does that break down percentage-wise?
Well, it's kind of funny because right now I do get a lot of like lifestyle branding sessions right now because people are, you know, I'm doing more video now. So a lot of people are aiming for me for that branding aspect because, okay, she can do the videos, she can do the photography. That's what I've been doing lately. I still get old families who have shot before. They always say, hey, Tosha, can I shoot the family thing for me? Or you really toy with my heart? And I really come do it. Like I had one family recently come to me saying, hey, we never had real family pictures. Yeah. People said that you're good. We really want to use you because you know how to bring personality. And I'm like, oh, you got my heart. I guess I can do it, you know? So I get things like that with, I shoot things that interest me, and sometimes we do shoot things that we don't want to shoot because I really want this new light, and I just want to, you know, work for it to get it. With special needs, I do have a lot of clients who I serve as I should say this, I am a 16-year pediatric occupational therapist, specializing in that. And I do get a lot of families say, hey, Tosha, can you come shoot my kid? You've been with my kid these years. Like recently, I think I showed you this. The last session I did was the one of my kids I had for 8 years. It's an OT client. And mom asked me to photograph him for his senior pictures, and she also asked me to walk him down the aisle for graduation.
Oh, wow.
So
I get goosebumps you saying that. Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I love my clients. Like recently I did extra testimonials from some of my clients just for OT things. I started my own practice in Atlanta. Yeah. And just getting all those testimonials and things they have said, things they experienced with me, they made me cry. I'm sitting here like, I never knew that I had a big impact on a person's life just for even 3 months to a year. Yeah. And then on top of that, the ones I have photographed, like I put a call on Facebook about, I need special needs kiddos. I can, build my portfolio for the special needs. And I didn't think I would get like 98 responses from people I served.
Wow.
They're like, we love you because we like people who know me since I graduated from school. And they're like, we watch your work grow and we're like, we're really happy that you're doing this. I'm like, oh, you playing with my heart. Stop it. So.
Well, but I mean, that in and of itself just speaks so loudly. There's number one, there's obviously need. Number two, you have a gift. You have a certain perspective that very, very, very few people have. And the combination of those things just put you in this awesome place to be able to launch a brand, which I think it would do so, so well. You mentioned that session that you shared with me. And yes, in fact, I actually have it pulled it up in front of me. And first of all, it's just beautifully done. And I know that something that you're a huge fan of is color and the vibrant color. And you can see that color in this too. But there is the portraits that you took of this person are just, they're insightful. Like you see this person's personality. And first of all, the fact that you're able to enable them to feel comfortable enough in front of the camera it could be a challenge in and of itself, right? So
Right.
you overcome that with your ability and your perspective. And then the fact that you're able to capture their personality so effectively. I mean, I wish the world could see these images. It's just beautiful, beautiful stuff. So the talent set is there. The perspective is there. You obviously already have the market as well. I mean, this is kind of an unusual consultation per se, because I think you've already done all the hard work, the heavy lifting. It's just a matter of kind of committing in one direction or another. But
Yeah.
what would you say? I mean, I think you've already really spoken to this, but just for the sake of conversation, for everybody listening in, what would you say makes your photography brand unique to your markets, the two markets that you're playing in, if anything?
I think you said I'm very personal. I'm just, I really try to stay in tune with people general. And I think as part of that is just because I'm a therapist. I think that is most of it, but also I think it's my upbringing, because I was raised with a mother who was a special needs teacher or a father who was also into education, helping others. So main reason why I end up as a therapist was because of them, because they said you have the personality to make a difference. And I was like, yeah, right. Because, I was a tyrant when I was younger. So I don't see that, I know what I'm capable of doing. So, but during the years, I started, getting shape into myself and what I'm good at and what I'm just a personal person. I mean, you can come to me, you can be in a bad mood, you may come out just smiling so hard that you're crying. So,
but I think it's the combination of your personality. You are extremely personable, extremely kind. You bring a perspective to bear, especially in working with the special needs community that is so unique too. Number three, what I find interesting, even as we're talking today, and we've talked in quite a bit in the past, but even as we're talking today, you talk with a sense of assertiveness. That is, it's not you cringed. For anybody that's not watching the video of this, you cringed, but that's not a bad thing. That's actually a really wonderful thing on multiple levels. So, number one, somebody that is working with somebody that's part of the special needs community. Of course, those needs vary from person to person, right?
Oh yeah,
and in some cases, very, very widely. So, perspective, again, your perspective and your experience is going to be helpful in that regard, but you have to be able to be assertive in the sense that you have to move quickly. You have to make decisions. Right. And I can tell, your brain just works so quickly.
That's the problem.
And I don't think that's a problem though. Again, I think it's actually a really wonderful thing. I wish I had that talent set at times because I tend to think too slow, but that's really an asset. And I think that's something wonderful that you bring to your business, and more specifically, potentially to this market, because I think it's going to pay dividends. It's going to play a pretty significant role in your ability to be able to handle a situation. You may only have 5 minutes with this individual in which they're comfortable enough to be able to be posed for some pictures, and then they're done, right? Or maybe you have 15 or 20 minutes, but you have to be able to be on for that 5 minutes and get the job done. And you obviously have the ability to move that quickly, to be assertive enough in that scenario. So I don't cringe. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a really great thing. You should play to your strengths. I think it's really wonderful. What would you say, kind of taking another step back and looking at this in a broader perspective? We talk about, I mentioned earlier, one of the benefits of a brand position, clear and distinct brand position, is it ultimately drives what you do in your business day to day. And if this is what you're going to, whatever the thing is, I'm voting for the special needs photography, but if whatever the thing is, if you're going to be focusing on that on a day-to-day basis for weeks or months or years on end, then there should be an underlying motivation that's driving you that is really bigger than yourself, right? It's just bigger than you mentioned earlier, kind of jokingly, like, I want to buy this equipment. I mean, when I started in photography, one of the reasons I even started in professional photography is because the idea of buying $1,000 camera was so exciting to me.
Like my like.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I was only like 20 or 21 at the time. So, it's so funny to look back on, but there is, and I know, by the way, I know that you have an underlying motivation that's much bigger than yourself, working with the special needs community and being in occupational therapy. But this is really important, again, for everybody listening in, when they're considering what brand position to establish. That brand position dictates how they're going to be spending their time. So they better be sure that this thing that they're doing is bigger than themselves, because that will enable them to minimize the possibility of burnout. They're going to maintain a certain level of motivation that will drive them day to day, because it's ultimately about serving somebody else or serving another community. And that will drive them in a much, much greater way than just, I want this thing, or I want that thing, or I want to be a great artist. There's got to be something innate to that's bigger than ourselves. So to that point, what would you say are maybe 2 or 3 of the bigger reasons why you even got into photography in the first place?
I think the first reason was because I was, I'm a mom. I did end up having a daughter. So when I was with my ex, we both were like, we really don't want to spend all this money on photography. Let us learn how to do it ourselves.
Okay.
So that was my main thing, because I really want to capture everything with her when she was younger. Me being in OT school, I was in school like 9 years straight just because I have an OTD in my field. So I was missing moments. So every time I get a chance to see her, I'll take pictures of her, like just doing, like playing, or she's just doing something bad and she don't supposed to be doing anyway. I've caught a couple of those moments. I'm like, well, or, because it's for me to remind myself, like, this is what I worked for. This is what I've been doing all my life to make sure she has a stable life. So she was actually my main motivator.
Okay.
My second motivator would be like, I had to do something with my right brain. Me being a therapist, I'm using the left brain most of the time, analytical and detailed. Even though I'm an OT does let me have some creativity to it as well, but not as much creativity that I want, because I was limited. Yeah. Wherever I work, I couldn't do what I really wanted. Like you said, my brain do go 100 miles per hour, sometimes 200 miles per hour. And I'm like, oh, I can make this and that, but I was limited. Sure. So I had to figure out ways how to get my right brain motivated as well, so I can be more creative to keep my sanity. Yeah. So that was my main. I just really want to use my right brain, be creative, and just do something I wanted to do. And that's not based on rules or any limitations of the government or anything, which is true because insurance.
Oh man. Well, yeah, but there is something to be said for creativity. I've realized this even more recently for myself, that as much as I have to spend time on kind of the practical, logical side, like you were talking about data analyzation, looking at the numbers, and that in and of itself, that has a certain appeal for me. I'm learning to appreciate it more than I used to. But the flip side of that is, as I've been making more of an effort to create content for the podcast, and we're putting out a lot of content in that regard, I've found a real enjoyment in that creative process. You're just creating, but I'm creating with a deeper sense of a need to add value to our community at large. Right. So selfishly, I enjoy the creative process, but underlying that is a desire to add value to somebody else. And that's an interesting similarity to what you're talking about here too, these two things. First of all, you wanted to capture your daughter. You know what it's like to have these images from your daughter's life as she's growing up, the significance of those. There's a very deep emotional connection there. And so if you have a desire to bring that similar experience to other people, you're going to have a deep emotional connection to that desire, because you know its significance for yourself. You want to give that same experience, that same feeling, those same emotions to somebody else. And at the end of the day, if sometimes it gets a little bit frustrating or annoying, you can reach back to that underlying motivation, which is bigger than yourself. It's about serving somebody else, to give them something that you've experienced. That is huge. That's awesome. And so I love that that's underlying what you're doing. And of course, then the creativity associated with that is, sure, maybe a bit selfish in nature, but it's ultimately enabling you to serve an individual or serve a community. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. And again, this is a great example for everybody listening in, as you're considering what you want to do on a bigger picture scale for the sake of a business model, and then ultimately determining what your brand position is. Make sure that the motivational factors involved go beyond just any kind of selfish motivation, that they're ultimately about in some way serving an individual, serving a group of people as a photography business owner, and that will sustain you for a much, much longer time. I think it makes a big difference. So I wanted to highlight that. But of course, it also plays into ultimately your decision about what brand position you land on, how you spend your time specifically, which brings us back to the conversation about what direction to go, right? So if we're looking, and I don't really, this is kind of a unique situation in that I don't need to do a whole lot of Google searching for results in Atlanta or in Birmingham for that matter, for special needs portrait photographers. I mean, you and I already talked about the fact, and I think you maybe even alluded to it earlier during our conversation today, about the fact that brand photography right now it's all the rage. Like everybody, it seems like, is doing it. So if you go that direction, you'd be playing in a really busy space, and you could probably find a ton of photographers just doing a quick search that specialize in that. You're likely not going to find many, if any at all. In fact, even just doing a broader search like Georgia or Alabama, special needs photography. And I did this earlier, and I'm going to pull up my browser here and just comment on what I'm seeing here. But when I search special needs photography, Georgia, by the way, for everybody listening in, just to give context to what I'm doing here, if you're curious, what kind of competition you have in the market that you want to serve, in the genre that you're wanting to photograph in, and in the specialty that you're wanting to photograph in, do a Google search. It's right there in front of you. Look at the first 3-4 pages of results. See what those photographers are talking about. And you can listen to some of our past brand position episodes and listen to some of those examples that I've read on air. But when I search special needs photography Georgia, by the way, instead of 560 million, I get 56 million results. And of course, they're not all going to be actually relevant, but you can see 10% of the results now. So we've narrowed it way, way down on a broader scale. But then when you start looking at the results that pop up, there really aren't actually photographers that specifically specialize in this. In fact, the first result that comes up, and I'm not going to name names here, but the first result that comes up when I search special needs photography Georgia is a photographer who specializes in fine art portraits. Whatever they've done with their SEO, maybe they photographed a unique session specifically for a special needs and somebody that's part of the special needs community, but that's not their actual brand position. They just happen to be at the top of the results as a result of potential SEO work that was done. If I do special needs photography Atlanta, let me look and see what comes up here. I'll do this live. The same person comes up, and then I scroll down. I see specialkidsphotography.com, which I think is kind of so this is Special Kids Photography of America, which is an organization that's at least partially dedicated to putting together a group of photographers who are photographing the special needs community in the U.S., which is really, really great, but it's not an individual business. So you don't really have competition there per se.
Right.
The next actual individual business that pops up, again, I click on that result, and this particular person, if I go to their portfolio, they have a family's portfolio and then something else that I'm not exactly sure what it is. But again, this person isn't actually specializing in. Similar experience with, if I search special needs photography Alabama, the only person that came up specifically from that search result that was kind of interesting actually, and I think this was from Alabama. Right here. So it was specialneedsportraits.com, and I will go ahead and shout out this brand. They're actually based in Washington State, but they've done a really great job of being specific and saying their position is inclusive photography for special families, but they're not anywhere close to your market. So not actual competition in the context of our conversation, which is good to note. It's important to note.
Yeah.
All this to say, you don't have a lot of competition. Unlike if you were going to be a wedding photographer, a portrait photographer, family photographer, brand photographer, where it might matter that we actually go and search and look at these individually, there just aren't a lot of results. And so at this point, the world or your markets are kind of your oyster. You get to do whatever it is that you want to. So it's really a matter of just deciding, number one, am I willing to commit, right? Number one. Number two, what will that messaging be? Now, because there isn't a lot of competition, really any competition, you can kind of pick your messaging. And you can, even more specifically, you can actually be quite broad in your messaging. Whereas is the example that I gave earlier as a wedding photographer, if I wanted to be a wedding photographer in Chattanooga, where I'm based, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I wanted to stand out, I wouldn't be able to just say wedding photographer Chattanooga, because there are plenty of those.
Right.
So I would need to be more specific. I could say I'm a black and white wedding photographer. Now that's narrowing it way down, or wedding photographer who only photographs in black and white. That's going to immediately filter out people that are not relevant. And then I could make it more specific. I could say I'm a black and white wedding photographer that's only photographing skateboarders, right? I can be more specific, but you don't need to do that. And that's the cool thing about your situation here, is that you can just kind of do whatever you want. You can be broad. You could say something, for example, like I wrote a couple of ideas down, but you could say something like portrait photography for the special needs community of Atlanta.
Yeah.
Or you could do the same thing of Birmingham. You could actually be really broad. So the question is, are you willing to commit, Tosha?
That's the thing, because like I said, I love doing everything else I do, but I know there's a need. I know a lot of people have talked to me about this. I had either big time photographers also come to me and say the same thing to me, like, Tosha, this is something you should have been doing a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then also my own little 19-year-old decided to come put her 2 little cents in and say, Mom, I told you that when I was like 16.
Really?
Yeah, because she always said, Mom, you always had a special heart, was working with kids with special needs. Like, that's what your practice is based on, is your personality and how parents respect you.
Yeah.
Because you come to the kids after like a real person. Because any person I know sometimes get hesitant when they're around kids with autism. They're like, oh, that kid's acting up. I embrace it. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
But, I really have to figure out what I want to do, and do I want to make it two separate brands, or do I want to make it one, make it one brand? Because I'm right now redoing my website after like a long time ago. I finally told somebody I need help, and can you help me do it?
Sure.
So I'm getting that help. But I'm just trying to figure out what to go. Should I still do both, or just do one? You know what I mean?
Well, and to that point, so there's a couple of different ways you can go here. And for anybody listening in, this is something to think about too. As much as specificity and I think ultimately focusing on one position is more beneficial in many cases, because none of us, as much as we might like to think that we are, and we're not necessarily great at multitasking when it comes to juggling multiple businesses, right?
Yeah,
that's a lot.
I know.
Well, that's a lot to think about. So here's the thing, though. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing proposition per se right this second. First of all, you mentioned earlier that you still have families that come to you and want you to photograph them, just generally.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing. It's not that you can't photograph anyone, everyone for that matter. You just won't market it. So now the question is, what services are you going to actually focus on marketing? And if you're still torn between, still torn between the special needs community and let's say branding, photography, go ahead, if you have the resources, the ability, the time to do so, and create two different websites. And you can create two different websites, two different brands dedicated to each. And the cool thing is, at the end of the day, the data will speak for itself. Make sure you've got Google Analytics plugged into both, and make sure that any revenue generated from either brand is very clearly distinguished, so you know how much you're making from each. And then you can just make the decision based, certainly on your personal experience, but also make it based on the numbers. The numbers don't lie, right? That's black and white at the end of the day. But I wouldn't try to put the two together, because trying to make sense of special needs photography and brand photography in the same site, that's going to be really, really tough.
Yeah, and that's what I was telling my web developer. I was like, I'm going to venture out of that. Should I add it to my website? She said, we can just make a different page to it. I said, that's how do I need to put it on the same website, So I just got to figure out, make sure to come up with a new name and stuff like that. And I really don't want to come up with another name for my brand, because I want people to know it's me,
Right. Well,
so I don't know.
It could be, it could be something as simple as just Tosha Gains. Because right now on your website, if I go to your website, it's just Tosha Gains Photography. It could be Tosha Gains. You could even use the same logo or a similar logo, maybe an adjustment to the logo for each of the brands, but then Tosha Gains in the subtext underneath brand photography, because right now it says just photography. Then the other site could say special needs photography or special needs portrait photography. But then the SEO would be developed out for each of the separate brands accordingly. All the imagery would be separated out accordingly. All the navigation on the site accordingly. It would be specific to each brand at that point. Yeah. And that's really important, is just creating that distinction. As far as the messaging is concerned, as I mentioned, on the special needs side, you can kind of be broad at this point. You can own a broader space in the market, because there are not a lot of people playing there. So it could be something as straightforward as portrait photography for the special needs community. My suggestion would be to at least call out the market in which you want to work, or markets in this case, if you are going to continue to travel back and forth and photograph in both. So, Atlanta and Birmingham, for example. So portrait photography for the special needs community in Atlanta and Birmingham. And then make sure that everything on your website backs up that brand position, the imagery and the copy to back it up. Now, if you go as far as the brand photography is concerned, we talked about this in Messenger ahead of time, but one of the suggestions, or the suggestion that I made at that point, because you talked about how much you like color, and of course the brand photography is ultimately geared toward a particular market, which is entrepreneurs. So what I was suggesting at that point as a brand position statement was vibrant environmental portraits for Birmingham entrepreneurs, because I think you said that you photograph them generally on site, correct?
I do.
So that describes the style of photography. It's vibrant. It's all about that vibrant color. The environmental portrait, the location that you're photographing in. Portraits, obviously, is the genre of photography. And then the location, Birmingham entrepreneurs, or you could say Birmingham and Atlanta entrepreneurs. And then you're calling out the market, the entrepreneurial segment of the market. So you can see how simple it is, but how specific it is. And that will create a certain amount of distinction for you. You could do a Google search as well in the brand photography segment in those markets. Make sure that nobody else is carrying that same position statement. But I think that would get you a long ways.
Yeah. I actually wrote that down. I actually have that already in my notebook. So
Perfect.
That's a good thing. I think that's the thing I was trying to figure out, is like how to make a brand statement for special needs, because I know you said I could be as broad as I want, but also I want to add that component saying, hey, I'm actually an occupational therapist who works in pediatrics, So I was thinking like that, because I think they give parents more comfort medically wise for their children.
Sure.
And that's what I was thinking.
No, and that's really smart, actually. So there's a distinction here between the position statement and then basically the about me section, right? So what we have to remember is that brand position statement, and again, for everybody listening in, make sure that you're putting that position statement above the fold of the website, meaning whether you land on it on your phone or you're on your desktop or your laptop, without scrolling, that's going to be the first thing one of the first things that you see is that position statement. And so again, in this case, it could be vibrant environmental portraits for Birmingham entrepreneurs, or with the special needs community, portrait photography for the special needs community of Atlanta and Birmingham. And then if they scroll down or they click on the About Me navigation at the top, you can give them context about the fact that you are an occupational therapist. And just briefly, and emphasis on briefly here, they don't need a book. They just need basic information about why your particular perspective and your experience is going to be valuable to this special needs photography. But what you want to give them first is what service you're bringing them and how that is different from anybody else. And you do that with that brand position statement above the fold.
Okay.
I think you are so onto something here. And one of the things, and we'll close with this. I want to respect your time and everybody else's time, but I'm so excited for you because you already mentioned the fact that you got those 95 comments on the Facebook thread, right?
Right.
So I know that part of your concern in picking a particular focus is that it maybe removes some of the potential for income that you want to generate for yourself through your business or your businesses. And I realize that there is that potential there. But I would also argue that obviously you have a massive market to play in. There are plenty of people that know who you are, who want that photography from you already, number one.
Yeah.
And then those people are likely part of the special needs community in one form or another and have contacts in that community as well to whom they can refer you as a photographer. So there's a potential even more business there. The fact that you are a specialist there makes you even more valuable as a photographer to that community. And so the likelihood that you get referred is even higher. I would argue that there's this massive market out there that would provide you just as much, if not even more potentially, photographic jobs for you if you're willing to commit to it. That's the big question mark, right?
Yeah. And that's what I've been thinking, like hearing feedback from you and everybody else. I mean, everybody's pushing me for the Tosha, do special needs photography because I guarantee you'll make so many families happy. Yeah. And I'm like, they'll make them happy, but also will I make myself happy? And then I realize what I'm treating with my kiddos at work, they are my best thing to see the progress, what they're doing, their personalities. I like when they come and give me hugs, give me fives. I mean, I laughed because I had one kid yesterday saying, I love you, Miss Tosha, but I know you have an autoimmune disease, but, social distance, I still love you, air five. I'm like, oh, thank you. He washed his hands the whole time for me. Yeah. And so he's like, look what you taught me. I'm like, oh, thank you. You made my day.
No, that's beautiful.
So the things like that, and I love to see, the adults work into vocational rehab and stuff, seeing them having jobs and stuff. That makes me happy, and I want people to see that with them. Not always thinking they just have a disability when they actually have an ability.
Yeah. So. 100%. Yes, we could spend a lot of time talking about that. I've had very similar experiences being so closely associated with the special needs community. So, listen to you. You're even talking about it. You get excited about it. It's so much a part of who you are. I would highly encourage you to at least explore it. And again, if there's apprehension about missing out on business, there's always the possibility that you can go ahead and create two brands. I mean, these days you have tools like Showit, our friends at Showit websites, or even something like Squarespace. If you want to go real basic, you could literally have a website up in a couple of hours and start running business to each of those and use the actual data, use the logical side of your brain that you're so good with. Look at the actual data there and what revenue you're generating from each. But I would bet that the combination of your heart as well as the available market for the special needs community, I think that's the one that's going to really blow up for you if you actually really throw yourself into it further. Nonetheless, I think we have some really good potential brand position statements here. And for anybody listening in, if you have further questions about this, don't hesitate to just send me an email. You can just say send an email to Nathan@bokehpodcast.com. I would love to further elaborate on this. But Tosha, I appreciate you being willing to have the conversation on air with everybody today. I think you're well on your way. Again, this is kind of a unique, I'm putting in air quotes here, consultation, because really, like you've got this thing already going for you. It's just a matter of deciding on it and then making sure that copy, the brand position on your website is really clear, very distinct. I think we've got a couple of good options here too. I think you'll be great.
Yeah, that's waiting for the time. I'm like, now I have free time to get everything together since we're all on quarantine right now. So
for sure,
might
yeah.
as well get those together.
Yeah, a little bit of context for anybody that might be listening to this episode down the road. We are kind of on quarantine, all around for the coronavirus. We do have a bit of extra time, and so it's a great opportunity. You're right, just to go ahead and start putting these things together and make plans. So when we come out on the other side of this, you can just go full force. I'm going to be cheering you on.
I'm planning on, I promise.
I'm really happy for you. We just remind all of our listeners just one more time where they can follow you online and they can cheer you on as well.
Okay. Well, if you go on Facebook, it's under Tosha Gains Photography.
Okay.
And then my Instagram is very interesting because my kids manage that. So I'm sorry for the name for it. I just say whatever to them. It's __ dot Tosha, TOSHA __. It matches up with my kids as well.
Well, we may have to work on coming up with a little more distinct handle too, or an easier handle maybe after you get that brand launched.
You know what? Maybe I'm gonna do that right now because it actually irritates me too. So I may have to figure that out right now.
Well, nonetheless, we'll link to your website and your Instagram handle in the show notes. Wish you all the best. I think you've got a really, really cool thing going for you, and I'll be cheering you on for sure.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Thanks so much, photographers, for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought of the show by leaving a review of the podcast in the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@bokehpodcast.com. We do try to bring this show to you commercial free, so make sure to check out our sponsors, photographersedit.com and Miilu, MIILU.com. Photographer's Edit is custom photo editing for the professional photographer, and Miilu is the simplest way to create and manage timelines and shot lists for the events you're photographing.